Hello, everyone, and welcome to Light Channel TV, and welcome to our two very special guests today from two different parts of the world on a very long distance. So, welcome, Ross, New Zealand.
Thank you.
And welcome, Jorge from Chile. Thank you for being
Yeah,
part of on this webcast today. As you have already seen on our first slide, the topic of today, it's actually something to do with Mission Impossible. And we are not here to convince anybody about the Bible. This is not really our job. It's not our job to convince people about to believe or not to believe in creation science. Our job today is to emphasize some of the topics within biblical archaeology, and also to talk a little bit about the different worldviews, how different groups of people, not just within academia, but also worldwide, how people are looking into these topics about creationism, about Bible archaeology. But before we start, I'd like, for the sake of our viewers, for our sake, to introduce yourself to our viewers. So, Jorge, would you like to introduce yourself? Who are you, and what gives you kind of the credential to have a conversation about this very important topic?
Yes, you're right. It's a very important topic, and also, well, nobody will qualify to
Mm.
present this topic worldwide because it's something that comes from the Lord. I mean, and He is beyond of all our credentials. But well, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer. My background is engineer. I have a master's degree in industrial engineering and civil engineering in Chile, and also, I've been qualified in Australia as an engineer, and I've been working in different companies in the world. I started this believing these feelings of helping this kind of work to present to my colleagues and classmates at university, and you face all those issues, and I got many surprises because most of the professors at my university, the top in Chile, they believe that there was no evolution, and they proved that. They have proven that, but they cannot publish that because there's so many people against. Then it was for me very good material to present to my friends and
Mm.
also to the church because they didn't know about this. We stigmatize the people at university. We think maybe they are totally opposed to creation or to the Bible, but it's not true. Some people are aware of the truth, and the only thing they cannot publish it. Okay,
Mm.
then we need to do the job. And I think well, the purpose of the Lord is not to convince. He wants to change your heart, and the motivation which is behind is important to be considered.
Mm.
Then I started to link the message of Jesus Christ, the message from the Bible, with the evidences, because most of the people, even in people inside the churches, are confused. They think maybe they they they, they think the science or what the scientists are publishing are totally correct. But if you look in the history, you will find that many scientists have been needing to change the position
Mm.
many times, even to today. Even in medicine, you can see that because sometimes they tell you one treatment and they change. No, no, this was wrong. We need to go for another treatment, totally different, in the
Mm.
opposite way. I say,
Right.
wow, well, then maybe I was practicing the wrong thing. Okay,
Mm.
things like that, and also in when you see that behind the science or behind the people that protect the science, the current science, are like a religion because they were upset of many years of when we pass through the Middle Age
Mm.
with so many people opposed to the research or
Mm.
opposed to the science because they were thinking that it opposed the Bible. Then obviously our reaction is the other extreme now. They think the Bible is wrong when not even in the Middle Age the people read the Bible, and so that's what the reason of the Middle Age, or dark era. Then then I started to share this with my friends, colleagues, and also in different fields, and I was pushed to be an actor in this field, and I realized that God has provided us with enough material to present to the world. But then I discovered things with about the discovery of Ronald Wyatt, and I was so happy to be part of these discoveries, and I needed to do it myself. I said, okay, and I went there. I visited places, and I was not only convinced, but also impressed deeply in my heart that this message needs to be used in the good way to convince and convert the people, which is the most important thing.
All right, thank
That's
you for that,
is my
Jorge.
general background.
Yeah. So you basically what you did, you wanted to see it for yourself. We're talking about some of the biblical archaeology sites. You wanted to be convinced and to do your own digging, your own study.
Yes, right.
All right.
And also to prepare my mind, and because it was so exciting, when you face the truth, your life changed, and that's happened to me. And I decided even to prepare to spend all my resources, most of my resources, to this work. That's why.
What about you, Ross? Who are you, and what is your background to even be part of a conversation about Bible, archaeology, and science?
Well, I can speak from my personal experience. I don't have an archaeological qualification, but I'll give you a bit of my background. I was trained in computer work. I'm an IT specialist, a computer programmer, analyst programmer. I was brought up in a Christian home, but in my teenage years, I did a lot, like a lot of young people, drifted out. I went through state government schools in New Zealand, and of course they teach evolution. And when I was about 22, I remember I was working in an office in London doing computer programming, and my mind was really agitated on, is what I was taught to believe as a child true, or is what I was taught to believe at college true? You know what I mean? A real basic question: is there a God? Does he love us? Does he exist? Or are we here by chance? Creation versus evolution going on in my mind. And I made a choice then. If there is a God, I will give myself to him, to serve him. And I can tell you my life changed dramatically at that point. And I always had these questions, though. How do we prove, well, perhaps that's not a good word, but how do we give evidence that there is a God and that the Bible stories are true? And I heard later, it was in the mid-80s, about Ron Wyatt and his discoveries, particularly the Ark of the Covenant. And so I began studying these, researching these, finding out what information I could. In 1999, I made my first trip to the Middle East, went diving in the Red Sea, visited Sodom and Gomorrah, went to Jerusalem, and everything was as he said. Now, I'd heard many lectures by Ron Wyatt, but it was good to go there and see these things myself. And everything that he said stacked up as true. It was exactly as he said. We found the sulfur balls and the burnt remains. We visited the Red Sea. We dived and we saw in the coral the round shapes the size of wheels. And I was thrilled because for many of the people I grew up with who are taught evolution is true, there's no God, the Bible's fairy stories, here was evidence that people could see. And so since then, my life has been changed. I basically now work on this full time. I'm doing 2 outreach programs at the moment, preparing material for others. I've done this for over 10 years now. I've been involved in probably over 1,000 baptisms as a result of sharing these discoveries.
Hmm.
So they're life-changing. It's well, what can I say? A different paradigm
Hmm.
to what the education system offers. Its education system says evolution, long periods of time, but these discoveries say, hey, look, if you take the Bible for what it says, you look in the right place, you find exactly what you'd expect to find. It's
Hmm.
there, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I can speak from experience. I've dived 120 times in the Red Sea. I've been to the Middle East about 16 times. I was blessed to be able to go to the real Mount Sinai in Arabia a few years ago. Interviewed people. So I'm not coming from a degree in archaeology perspective, but this is what I found on my journey to prove these things,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yes, sure.
Good.
Well, this program, this webcast is, let's call it a tiny tentative to maybe give some answer to critical remarks concerning the integration of the Bible, archaeology, and science. As you already know, this is not a secret. A lot of people, either you're within the Christian community or outside the Christian community, people see these, let's say, three entities or not being able to combine, or maybe a little bit. They don't see Bible as a reliable book or a book presenting evidence. So we are going to have a look at the paradigm, which you already mentioned a little bit, Ross. We're not going to present evidence or proof in this introduction webcast. So let's just for for the beginning assume that the argument of some, or maybe a lot of people, scholars all over the globe, is true that the biblical account about Israelites have not been in Egypt, never wandered 40 years in the desert, did not conquer Canaan. King David's existence is probably, just a story. His son Solomon is doubtful. Some even claim that after 50 years of archaeology in Israel, the place where the Bible kind of originated, has not come up with a single piece of evidence that would corroborate its own narratives. This is still the mainstream belief. Am I completely off track here? This is what you experience, Jorge?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's because when you look at the general background of
Hmm.
the information, you can get confused because also when you're being driven by the most popular movement, yeah, you can get very confused. Then all the traditional way of presenting things. For
Hmm.
example, you mentioned the people think that there was no Israelites in Egypt at that time when the the uh, the Exodus happens, no? Then, but they base in tradition. They think that all the time they were slaves in that area, and they were there for 430 years or 400 years, depending on the text they used. But they confused because they don't understand the Bible, and they don't interpret the Bible correctly. They were, yes, but they were invited to that land. And they stayed in that land just for 260 years, no more than
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Okay, not 400 years. That was most of the people think, because when the Bible mentioned, for example, the word Mizraim, which is Egypt, translated to Egypt, it doesn't mean Egypt. It means in uh, in places where they were persecuted or they
Hmm.
were not owning the land. That's why it happened. It started with Abraham, the period, with
Hmm.
Isaac, with Jacob. Then that's what lasted 400 years. This period of time. Then when they entered to Canaan, they finished that period of time. They were
Hmm.
40 years in the desert. They were 260 years in Egypt. And most of the time, they were not slaves there. They were
Hmm.
invited to live there. Just at the last period of time, they were slaves. But it shouldn't be slaves because they had not given, there was no reason for them to be slaves, just were
Yeah.
submitted by a government. Okay?
But one
Then,
would
then that's why they
argue,
get confused.
Sorry, Jorge. Well, one would argue that this is your viewpoint, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we're not going to present any evidence here. We're basically going to have a conversation about the foundation of critical thinking. So Ross, I'm going to put up on the screen. I was reading recently a paper by a Jewish archaeologist, and his name comes up here. That's not the one. Let me put the next one. We're going to have a conversation about that as well. Jan Gunneveg, he's a PhD Bible archaeology and science. This is his paper, which can be found on ResearchGate. And I want to emphasize his statement, which he's placing right in the beginning of his research, which is also about creationist Bible and science. So from a didactic viewpoint, one is not allowed the assessment by assuming that a specific individual is right, whereas another is wrong, without providing any substantial evidence to sustain his acceptance or refusal of the historical Bible. So back to you, both of you, Ross. From a didactic viewpoint. So I cannot tell you, this is what he's saying, if I can translate it in more kind of layman language, I cannot tell you that you're wrong about, let's say, Sodom and Gomorrah. I've been there myself, but I didn't do any archaeological research. So how do you take this, actually, which I believe it's a very important point? How do you, without providing any substantial evidence, how do you take it and translate it into real conversation with people? Because I believe this is the foundational. When people disagree in general with you, either within academia or layman people, do they have a right to disagree? Of course, yeah, you can have your own opinion. But is this viable and didactic? What is your experience on that?
Okay, it's a good point. And you mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah, and that's probably a good illustration. If you go to the sites, you will find signs put up there by the National Parks Board of Israel, which say these deposits are what they call Lisan deposits. In other words, what they're saying is the Dead Sea was higher at some stage in the past, and as it evaporated or shrunk away, it left behind these deposits. That's the usual, if you want to call it, mainstream academic view of these particular sites. But I can tell you this, we've done our own research on this, and I'll tell you some things that contradict that. First of all, if these sites were from the lake, and the lake was that high, you would expect to find these deposits all around the whole of the Dead Sea, not just these specific areas. That's one point. Secondly, you would find within these formations the same minerals that you'd expect to find in the water today, but you don't. We've analyzed these formations, which we believe is ash, which the academic world would say these are evaporate deposits from the water drying up, but you don't find the salt that's in them. These formations are very clean. We've had them analyzed in the lab. It's very clean calcium sulfate with very small traces of magnesium. That has not been left behind by the Dead Sea water, because the Dead Sea water has a lot of potassium chloride in it, and there's virtually none in these formations. And what we do find is consistent with the Bible story. The Bible talks about how whole cities were burned up with sulfur, which is brimstone coming down, burning, and burning up limestone cities. That's the Bible picture. Now, if you take that picture and apply it to these formations, it's exactly what you'd expect to find. It's basically ash from limestone buildings burnt with sulfur. And the analysis that we had done in the lab, what struck the scientists who did these tests for us, they said, these samples are very clean. Normally, you'd find a whole lot of trace minerals, a whole range of minerals or elements within any sample you get. But they said these are very pure samples, because what happens when you've got a furnace, a very hot fire, what is left behind in the ash is very clean. When I say clean, what I mean is very few trace elements other than that which is composed of. If you go to the soil around the Dead Sea and take a sample, you'll find a whole range of minerals in there. But these formations is essentially ash. Anything that can be burnt is vaporized off, and you're left with extremely clean, pure calcium sulfate with these very pure sulfur balls left behind. That doesn't make any sense at all from it being left behind by the Dead Sea drying up, but it makes perfect sense if you take the Bible story and think these are limestone cities that have been burnt with brimstone. So there's one example, the one you brought up.
Well, Ross and Jorge, I know, Jorge, you from a previous webcast, you've been to the Dead Sea and Sodom and Gomorrah. But both of you, did you go there? Were you biased, when you went there? Did you go there with the full expectation that you're going to find exactly what the Bible said you're going to find? I know you were both men of faith, but were you so biased that your expectations were 100% that you're going to find exactly what the Bible said? What did you experience, Jorge? And how was your experience?
Well, my experience was a very, very good experience. I cannot forget, because once I went there, I remember the first time I take 3 American girls, one guide from the area, and the guide was impressed because he didn't know he was the guy working for tourism in the area, in the zone. Then he was impressed when I was telling. They say, "You come from the far away from the lost part of the world to teach me when I'm living here." So I couldn't believe it. No? And they were so excited about the things I was telling them, and also. And at the end, they were asking me, "Oh, George, how are those sulfur balls? We can see, we cannot find the sulfur ball. Where are they?" I said, "Okay, we will find one," I said. And I found one in a place close to the one very large rock. Took it with my hand. I opened with my hand, and I said, I found one. All day running to me, When he saw that ball in my hand, then he said, shouting at the loud voice, saying, "Wow, then the Bible is truth." I felt in my heart, I felt like a joy coming out. And I look at him as well. I will see in heaven, because the only thing we need to know is that the Bible is truth. I believe the Bible is truth from my childhood. Then when I see the evidence, joy come from my heart. And I'm full of joy because of that. Then I wanted to experience that in first person, because I wanted to bring this material to my friends here in Chile and everywhere around the world. For example, they asked me, the same person asked me, "Why are you doing this job, George?" I said, "Because I want to send things to my friends and to my classmates, or to my co-workers." And he said, "Why? Why you need to do that?" "Because I want to present evidences to them." "Why?" They couldn't understand. Why? I said, "Because they don't believe." Why they don't believe? They say, because to deny the biblical truth to them is something like for you denying about the founders of your country. Understand? Because nobody in Israel or in Palestine, you cannot find people that not believe in God, or they believe in evolution. No, all of them believe in the Bible. Then for us, it's very important to bring those important discoveries to be known by the world, because the world is confused. It's very, very heavily confused, and we need to open their eyes. That's the situation.
Thank you, Jorge. Ross, what would happen? Let me put this critical question to you. I know it's late over there, but what would you have done if you didn't find exactly the description of Sodom and Gomorrah as in the Bible, and you didn't find really the evidence over there? How would your reaction? How would you have reacted? I know this is a very tough question, but I'm assuming that you are a critical thinking person. So would your bias, would you have been so biased to say, well, maybe we should dig some more, maybe we should search some more? So please go ahead.
Sure. No, it's a good question. And rest assured that I went with an open mind. I had heard Ron Wyatt share these discoveries and also Jonathan Gray. And I went with my brother, who is a very critical thinker as well. And we wanted to evaluate these things. And so if, for example, what we had examined had been proven that it was not or does not fit Sodom and Gomorrah, but was in fact, say, lake deposits, then we would have had to be honest and said, okay, as nice as the story sounds, it doesn't stack up. Because there's no point in hiding the evidence and then telling the world, look, we found Sodom and Gomorrah, and people come and prove it's not true. So no, we were thrilled to see that everything we could check out was exactly as we had been told. And so that was, but we went with a critical, when I say critical, objective, perhaps that's a better word, an objective approach. We wanted to see if the evidence stacked up to what we'd been told verbally.
Right. And I believe this
it's
is
a very important, very important question, because, most of, some of the people I found, some of the people that try to put little lies, just to convince people, because they think they're doing the God's work, just trying to push the truth, which is not right. It's not. We need to be very precise and very careful
Truthful.
about telling exactly the truth, what we see. And when you do that, you'll find a very excellent experience, because there are also hidden things that are not revealed because of tradition. And tradition is also in the church doing his job. Then when you open your mind and you try to investigate or do a deeper research, you'll find a greater truth. It's incredible. Even we need to read the opposition and study the opposition and consider the subjects. I have one friend, which is very well qualified friend, who studied all the books of evolutionists, all of them. And he found in their books more evidences in favor of creation than evolution. But for many of the religious people, it's like a taboo.
That's
not to read those books because they think it's from the devil, which is not right.
Let's move a little bit on here. I want to just cover a couple of the paradigms, the worldviews that we find among people today. Either we're talking to laymen or we're talking to academia, people of science, people with backgrounds in science, in different science that can either prove or disprove creation story. And we need to realize that many people, doesn't really matter the background. This is at least my experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, Russ and Jorge, but I'm sure you've experienced people that sometimes overlook the fact that if one cannot prove a theory, let's say that creationism is a theory as evolution, one does neither have per se, let's say, the right either to or the duty to just dismiss it. Am I correct? Okay, we don't have the right. Well, we have the freedom to do it, but I'm thinking like in a court of law, at least in some countries still, at least this is what we believe, that one is innocent until proven otherwise, right? Likewise, I would like to emphasize that in science, one has to prove that a previously held theory has no right to existence. Okay, this is my point here. And this is the point which the Jewish science guy, which I mentioned before, is also making in his paper, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. So do you have the right, and what gives you the right, to disprove basically evolution theory, which is actually, it came after the creation theory, and that's how the evolution theory disproved creation. That's another story. That's another conversation. We don't want to go in there because this is not really our task today. But let me put here on the screen one of the first worldview, which is called a separatist science as a materialist. No mix between the science and religion. Darwin, greatest scientist ever. Bible might be good, but mythical, right? Okay, this is what we see among many people, especially in Western countries, right? I know there is a slight difference if you go to South America. Many countries in South America have at least some Christian background or some Catholic background. But Jorge, do you find this worldview, this mindset, this paradigm overwhelming in the South American society, which I've just mentioned before? Bible might be good, but it's mythical.
Yeah, well, that's a general position, I could say, in the academic world. And most of the people tend to think that way because when they see that the scientists, they respect the science, then when they see that the scientists are thinking that way, they follow the path. But because of the evidences that we are spreading right now, the mind of many people is changing. Now they think, wow, I was confused then, or I was misled. And they're seeing the truth as it is right now, but not most of the people, because we need to do a special work now to spread these truths everywhere. But we always need to have in mind what we find in Luke chapter 10, verse 21. It says that Jesus Christ says it himself after he seeing the work what he was doing with the first disciples. He says in that same hour he was full of joy in the Holy Spirit and said, I give to you, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have kept these things secret from the wise and men of learning and have made them clear to little children. For so, O Father, it was pleasing in your eyes.
Yeah.
Then we must understand that maybe when we're trying to convince the learner and the wise men, maybe we're working against God's will, because God's will, he wants to hide the things from them. And it's amazing when you see evidences of strong, but that strong that was Ross mentioning, for example, the sulfur balls, when you see the evidences of the soil, all that, and the people, scientists, people are confused, then you say, wow, this is, for me, is a proven fact that the God is under control, because it's very difficult to go against the learner people, okay? To confuse them, because they are the learner. If you go to a classroom and you ask about mathematics, something, the learner and the wise will answer you first. But in the spiritual field, it's different. It's the opposite. The child are with more light than the learner. Then you say, wow, this is something totally against the logical thinking. Then it must be somebody under control and very powerful. That's our God.
Right. But Jorge, let's assume that I respect, you're a Christian, you're a Bible believing individual, but that doesn't work for me. Let's assume that I'm an atheist. I do not believe in the Bible. I need you to give me enough science. And we also know over the years, Ross, that many historians and archaeologists alike have pointed out, and still does, and even within the Christian community, as you know, probably the story with Jonathan Gray and creation science, the still the conversation going on about Noah's Ark. Well, they pointed out that many stories in the Bible should be taken with a grain of salt, at least. Many stories. So we also have the media, mass media on one side, which, let's put it mildly, they do not even anticipate the consequences which their narrative will have on society as such by covering only a one-sided research, right? Because I was just as an example, I was having a conversation this weekend with some family members and mentioned just Jonathan Gray's research, 40 years plus, 50 books, a lot of research, a lot of information, which is scientific, as you know, a lot of scientific information, a lot of scientific data, which is valuable data. A lot of people have been involved over the years, including yourself, Ross. This is not just something somebody has made up because he's Christian and he really want to twist the Bible to fit the biblical narrative. So talking to this mindset, which we just had here on the screen, talking to this mindset, we might also find this mindset within the Christian community, which is known as theistic evolution. Science as a materialist, but suspect that God is behind what you're studying. Not sure when or where or how, but let's all get along as Christians. Evolution is scripture, it's not scientific, so don't expect any biblical insight into science, just general morality. So Ross, how do you approach, I've already mentioned two groups of people, I know very complex question. The first group, it's totally skeptical, it's fully expecting from your side to be 100% scientific. And then you have the second group of people, I've just had it here, the theistic evolution group of people. How would you approach the first group and then the second group?
Well, that's a big question. There's a text in the Bible that says, "Canst thou by searching find out God?" God wants us. He says in the Bible, "Come now, let us reason together." I guess where it has to start with each individual is they have to be willing and honest where the evidence leads. Because if a person, I'm speaking generally here, if a person puts more emphasis on his career or getting ahead than he does on wanting to know the truth, he will remain locked in the system. I know it's very hard for someone who comes through the education system, become a scientist, he's published papers, to challenge that, because people can lose their careers, and this has happened. If people become a Christian, if you know what I mean, a scientist, they can get marginalized. They won't get grants and things because there's many, many examples of this. Scientists who discovered soft tissue in dinosaur bone, and they shared this, and this rattled the evolutionary community, because how could a bone 65 million years old supposedly still have soft, flexible tissue inside? And we know it fits a 4,000-year time frame from Noah's flood, but it doesn't fit evolutionary time frames. And the scientists who published this weren't trying to prove the Bible, but that evidence challenged the evolutionary community, because it doesn't fit with 65 million years. And they had problems because, unfortunately, as the word paradigm is a good one. There's such a paradigm within the evolutionary community, the academic community. Anything that challenges that does not bode well for the person who shares that information. Do you know what I'm saying? So a person, if they want to come to the truth, has to be willing to lose, if you want to say it this way, their career almost in pursuing what is the real truth of a matter. Otherwise, it's so easy to say, well, look, if I research this, I'm going to lose my job or lose my position at the university or lose my grants, and they may not want to do that. So I hope that helped answer a little bit of the perspective.
Yeah. Well, that's one perspective, and I completely agree with you. Did you have this experience, Jorge, that you had to give up maybe friends, maybe career, maybe popularity, because you had this certain view, you decided to basically follow the science which you have seen with your own eyes?
Yes, well, in a certain way, but the most general thing for me is the opposite because I'm part of the scientists, no?
Mm.
And that well, it's like a scientist being converted. Then I've been very popular in my normal friends and family and everybody. But when you talk, for example, one day I was doing claiming the mountains. No, I was in a club, and one day we did a very long trip to the peak of the mountains. No? Then we spent many hours with different friends. And on those friends were two scientists, very top scientists, one Chilean and one Brazilian. They were a couple. And I said, wow, that's my opportunity now to talk to them about what I know. Then I start talking. I address the subject and we start talking. But when they reached the point where I was confronting evolution, for example, they were so upset. They
Mm.
didn't want me to talk. And I said, okay, please, I've been trying to 5 times and you have stopped me to talk. Why don't you leave me talk again? I said, and but listen to me because when you hear my what I'm gonna say, maybe you will change your mind. Please let me do it. I presented my background. I was general manager of a company. I was a very top scientist, also working in different fields now. Then they say, okay, George, sorry. We will respect you and we will hear what you want to say. I
Mm.
started to talk again, and they didn't do it.
Mm.
They stopped me. They stopped me 3 more times, and I said, "Well, I gave up. I gave up." When I came back to my home, I said, "Wow, why they couldn't listen? Why they didn't listen? Because of Luke chapter 10, verse 21." Yeah, sorry. Yeah, uh, Chase. Because I was fighting not against the devil. I was
Mm.
fighting against God's will.
Mm.
God doesn't want yet them to be having access to that information.
Mm.
Then it will come. The future,
All
in
right.
the future, we will spread that information. They cannot deny because
Mm.
there are going to be happening many special things that will convince them from
Mm.
the different way, and they will be finding themselves very confused now
Mm.
because all the castle they were building is going to be destroyed, demolished.
Yeah.
But that time when it comes, we will be witnessing because it's very short in short time that it will
Yeah.
come. Then it's a
Well.
very, and it makes you unpopular. Professors, and they tell you this
Mm.
is very important. One of my professors at university, a doctor, and he was a medical doctor,
Mm.
and he quit being a medical doctor and he came back, he came to be an engineer, and he was the head of the biophysics department in my university, and he discovered evidences, very strong evidences about the perfection of the genetical code. And he says, wow, that's amazing. This not something is so special, it's perfect. It cannot fit. This is exactly configuration to have the maximum of information in a minimal
Mm.
space. It's incredible. It's perfect. So I said, why can't you give me the papers? I said, yes, of course, George. He gave me the paper. Why are you so interested in this? He says, because, well, I believe in a perfect God. And you have proven that his creation is perfect. And for me, it's a proof of the
Mm.
creation of God. Says, wow, wow, so interesting your point of view. And he proved with the same exercise, he proved
Mm.
scientifically that the theory of evolution was wrong, couldn't be possible. He
Mm.
presented that study in the symposium, in the international symposium, and he was so attacked that he said, well, I'm not trying to prove against something against evolution. I just was presenting my point of view and my discovery that I did in my lab, because
Mm.
it was against the common thinking of the people. They
Mm.
think maybe most of the people at the of that hierarchy, they think maybe we are coming back to middle age. That's why they're scared of trying these subjects, but they're totally confused. Then it's becoming unpopular to defend that. And then some people, they think they will lose their credentials. That's what they're scared.
Mm.
But what they believe, they keep it in secret now. All
Mm.
my professors at university, same thing. Same, not all of them, most of
Mm.
them.
Mm.
Yeah, having the
Well,
same experience.
well, I
Okay.
guess every one of us here in this webcast would wish that it was so simple, and to say that people will just have to look at the evidence and then make up their mind. But it's not that simple, as you know. Jorge, you presented some kind of agenda, which and Ross as well, especially through the education system that has been implemented over the years. And this is not the subject today, but I'd like to go to the second point, second mindset which we find today in the world, which is integration conquered this. Both science and scripture tell of the same creator. Reason and revelation should agree. What the Bible says about nature, what nature says about the Bible should both be listened to, and a concord or agreement found within both. So both science and scripture tell of the same creator. And I guess it's not a secret. I suppose that all of us are within that mindset, that paradigm, that this is what we strongly believe, not just because we are biased, Christian biased, but this is because the evidence you have seen, Jorge, and you have seen, Ross, during your travels, during your studies around the world. Would you say that this is the most applicable to not just science, but archaeology? Because our next webcasts with you, God's will be based on your findings, your personal findings. And by the way, we want to mention to our viewers your very interesting video, which you have done recently, Jorge, which I'm going to ask you in a couple of minutes to present a little bit. And Ross, I'm also going to ask you in a few minutes I'm going to go through your website. You have some very interesting material, which I'd like to forward to our viewers, whoever is interested in your research and what you've done over the years. But back to this mindset, back to this paradigm, which I've just mentioned, which I have on the screen here. Integration, both science and scripture tell of the same creator. Now, the question is not here why, how much science do we find in the Bible, how much is non-scientific in the Bible. The question is, should have been like this in the first place, and now in your experience, why would people decide or choose to go away from this integration mindset? Ross, what would you say to that?
Okay, yes. Here's a thought. There's no conflict between genuine science and the Bible. No problem at all. God is a creator God who works within laws of physics. I mean, God does miracles, but the nature we see works within laws of physics that can be tested. There's constants, exactly. There's electrical charges we can measure light, we can measure mass, we can measure all these things very scientifically. What we do find today, and again, sorry to harp on the education system, but there's a blurring between the theory of evolution and genuine science. It's almost like they're mixing the two, and people don't distinguish between what is purely a theory and what is proven science. And that's very important, because people like to label evolution as science, but it's not. It's still a theory, which actually, as time goes on, people finding more and more holes in the theory of evolution. And you're mentioning about DNA. That's a classic example. There is no rational explanation for how DNA could have come about by chance. Random mutations and this sort of thing. There's no explanation. And I think as science discovers more and more, the less the theory of Darwin is plausible. The theory of evolution as we know it today is quite a long way from what Darwin put forward, over 100 years ago. More than that, now it's 160 something years ago.
It's evolving.
What Darwin... Yeah,
The theory is
that's right. The
evolving.
theory
Yeah.
of evolution is evolving. That's right. That's true. So yeah, did that help answer the question?
Well, that's that's your background to answer this question. So I like it to think about the next statement which comes up on the screen here, because out of this the second worldview, out of this worldview we have today intelligent design, which probably many of you have heard about, presented by Discovery Institute, for example. Science demands a designer. You figure out who this designer is. We don't try to make the Bible fit the science. You can if you want. Theistic evolution is wrong because Darwinian evolution doesn't work without intelligence and design. Now, there is the second one coming out of this worldview, the second worldview, integration, concordism, which is progressive creationism, old earth creationism, as presented by huge reason to believe. The Bible tells the truth about God and about nature. We find science to be true and the Bible to be true, and try to explain how to understand the Bible as supporting or not contradicting the science. Now, for many people in our target group today, as we have discussed, are skeptics, are not necessarily atheists, and we are not talking necessary to Christians today. But for those people where the Bible is not an authority, because this is the bottom line, Bible is not an authority today, not anymore, not even among many Christians, people that call themselves Christians. So we're talking about science, and my question based on this statement and these worldviews which we have here on the screen again. How come, Jorge and Ross, in your view, how come we find a certain number of well-known, renowned scientists in both camps? Because this is what's happening today. And as you mentioned, Jorge, you are also a scientist. Ross, you've done your own research over the years. You have traveled many places around the world. You have written books and so and such. So how come we find people in both camps, people of science, with background in science? Why why don't we find a consensus? Because if science was science, that would have been very simple. And now I know I'm going to confuse probably some of our viewers, but science is not science for everybody, right? And I'm not going to answer this question for you. I have my answer. But Jorge, why don't we find consensus among scientific people today? Because we find them in both camps.
We have that consensus, but the problem is it's not published. It's not maybe well accepted because of tradition. That's the problem. Tradition is playing a very heavy role. That's why in the presentation you mentioned that I prepared, I talk about tradition a lot, and even I do an exercise, because when your mind is set from your childhood, then it's very hard to change your mind with evidences, because you are used to some costumes and traditions. And it's something like is maybe you have another interest. For example, if a person wants to live, he thinks maybe heaven is a very buried place, and when you're gonna be in a cloud touching the harp, no, and living praying all day. Now that's bored for the young people here. Then they don't want to know about the Bible. They don't want to know, because they have that set of mind of something wrong going in that direction. They want pleasure. They want free sex. They want things like that. Then they think it's not for them good to believe in the Bible, because it's not convenient. Maybe later, maybe when I will become old, I will believe in the Bible. But they don't know that the Bible is totally the opposite. And the religion is totally the opposite. It's the real freedom, it's the real happiness. But they need to witness that. And that needs faith and experience they don't have. Then when you mix the try, and some people, because of the situation, because most of the people, they don't want to believe in the Bible, they think they try to compensate. They try to mix things because they are very good politicians, I could say. And politicians do like that, no? They try to say, okay, well, we can mix both point of view, we can make it together, and don't fight, don't be upset. Just maybe if there is a conjunction in that position, but the true science fits perfectly with the Bible evidences, with Bible history. Okay?
Right.
Perfect, but we need to look for a bit deeper. When you look from the general background, yeah, you can see maybe, okay, that's opposed to the Bible. Like, for example, Robert Gentry. Robert Gentry wanted to prove that the Bible was wrong and evolution was right. Then he went deeper into the radio halos, and he discovered the opposite. He said, no, there is a big contradiction here. He went deeper into the universe, and he found also evidences of a very powerful God that created the heavens. That's why the heavens declare the glory of God. Says, wow, incredible. Now he came back to be a creationist and to be a Bible believer. He is one of the top scientists we can mention. Then you need to go deeper. But the general position is that because it's a very common and uncomfortable background to sit there and say, okay, both are okay, but it's not right, because you cannot mix water with oil.
Well,
Are very separated things.
what I'm hearing you, Jorge, you're actually, correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that you're implying that some people are hiding behind kind of a science because they don't want to have the Bible paradigm, which will eventually imply that there has to be a change of mindset within a moral codex, law of this is what the Bible demands, and is that what you're implying, if I understand you correctly?
Right. One example is, for example, in Egypt, the authorities in Egypt, they don't want to benefit the Israelites people, okay, because they think the Israelites are the enemies. Then politically, if they found something that proved the Bible, they think, yeah, they were working in behalf of the Israel. Then they want to deny that. For example, they found out those big pits of where the the wheat was stored, built by Joseph. They say, no, those are graves, okay? Because if they found something written proving the Bible, they say, no, we cannot show that to the world because this is help for the enemy. But it's totally the opposite. If they really prove the Bible is truth, they will prove also the Messiah is truth. Then they will go against the Israel, because Israel is not accepting Jesus Christ. And so then if they work with the truth, they will find the best way to for their purpose.
So,
but they
so
Ross,
Ross,
it's a political issue.
All right. Okay. You just mentioned that, Ross. If we look at these paradigms, which I've mentioned, and I have a couple of more before we finish this webcast, it's not really about the science, is it?
No. We know that we're in a war between truth and error, the behind the scenes that we can't see. And we're really, the biblical analogy is we're actors on a stage, so to speak. There's two forces at work in this world, forces of truth and forces of falsehood. Jesus and Satan, we're in the great controversy, if that's the right term to use. And so people are unknowingly taking sides. When people compromise with truth, as Jorge was saying, in Egypt, for example, if they discovered something that confirms the Israelites were in Egypt, because of politics, it gets brushed aside or buried or forgotten, because there's politics. But behind the politics, of course, is the devil's attempt to cover up the truth. Because anything that shows the Israelites were in Egypt is confirming Bible history. And of course, there you go. The Bible's true, so there's a Messiah's true, the whole process. So we're seeing the effect of this invisible battle between truth and error, between Christ and Satan. and it manifests itself in politics, in archaeology, in science, so-called, you know, research. What gets funded and what doesn't get funded. You know, the politics in science is terrible. You know, but anyway, I'm sure you understand.
Yeah. So science is not just about hardcore evidence. You go there, you do your job, you do the archaeology, you do the readings, whatever you find. Maybe you ask some experts, some colleagues, and then you have established the truth, and then you're going to publish, and then everybody else is going to believe that. Is this how it's working? I mean, just to mention Ron Wyatt, even within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, he's not still quite popular because of his fine. But nevertheless, before we move on to, well, let's take the next worldview, one of the last I want to mention before we finish this webcast, which is conflict. You have to be a scientific materialist or a theist, but you can be both. Darwinian evolution or young earth creation, take your choice and fight it out. How much would you agree with this worldview, which basically says it all? Can you combine it? Can you combine the two worldviews, being a creationist, that was the one here, being a creationist, if we go back, the previous worldview, which was integration, both science and scripture tell of the same creator, and then you have to be either a creationist or a Darwinian evolutionist. Can you integrate? Like take for example, young earth creationism, as explained by Geoscience Research Institute, Answering Genesis, Creation Museum. The creationist tends to suggest literal biblicism or nothing. God did it all quickly and recently. There is very rapid devolution after the Edenic fall, but no evolution. Noah's flood answers all our problems with geology. And then you have on the other side the Darwinian evolution, God and Stephen Hawking, 7 days that divide the world, Peter Hitchens, The Rage Against God, Michael Novak, No One Sees God, Atheism, No God Necessary, Science Has It All Figured Out Without Need of a Designer or Creator. This position is scientifically falsifiable, as honest evolutionists admit, although they search for some extraterrestrial substitute for the biblical creator. So what I'm trying to emphasize here, and I like to have your answer, this is the last worldview which we're going to present today, based on your own experience. I'm sure you have met a lot of people that are trying to mix those, as we mentioned before. Do we see a struggle within the Darwinian mindset to keep going and try to twist science still, even after so many years, 160 plus years after the theory of evolution, and after so many years of debunking the evolution theory? But we still see this in our education system worldwide, almost in every single country. We still see this as the acceptable scientific theory, and creationism is still on the fringe, even if we see an increase within the scientific community, even if you, as you mentioned, Jorge, we do see a consensus, but the media, of course, the mainstream media is not covering this consensus, is not covering discoveries, as you mentioned, Ross. Do you experience this struggle? As you mentioned before, this is a battle between good and evil. You know, it's not really about science, because if it was just about science, I would believe that probably almost everybody would be convinced about science. Wouldn't you say so, Russ?
Yeah. I'll tell you, as you were talking, I was thinking of a very interesting documentary I saw a few years ago called Expelled. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was examining the cases of scientists who challenged the community they were in. But I'll tell you the funny thing in that, the very last interview he had was with Richard Dawkins.
Mm.
You know who Richard Dawkins is?
Mm.
He's kind of like one of the prime spokesmen for evolution.
We know him very well
And
here in Europe, yeah.
okay, right. And in this documentary called Expelled, at the end, the Ben, what's his name? I can't remember, think of his surname, interviews Richard Dawkins. And he put to him, where did DNA come from? And Richard Dawkins says, maybe it came from extraterrestrials. And it was classic because here's these people kicked out of university for teaching intelligent design, right? This is what the documentary is about. People who accept intelligent design lose their jobs. But here's Richard Dawkins himself admitting or saying his belief was DNA had an intelligent designer. And the irony was amazing. You know, here's this leading evolutionist admitting there had to be an intelligent designer. He was saying perhaps DNA came from extraterrestrials in outer space. You know,
yeah,
it was quite amazing.
So trying to avoid actually to give the answer about a creationist, about an intelligent designer. Jorge, do you meet yourself this kind of approach within the scientific community, within the universities that you're going to, and people still that you're talking to, trying to avoid a real answer to this major question: who is behind it when we're talking about DNA? And in our next programs, we're going to present scientific evidence based on your own discoveries, where people have found, and people of science, experts have found DNA. So, Jorge, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, most of the common people that I met in the past, they were not thinking that way. But now, recently, it started happening this, which is a new answer because when they cannot deny some discoveries of intelligent design, for example, then they say, well, we must be the work of aliens, no, coming from outer space. They did experiments here in the which is that what is behind of that is the willingness of not accepting the Bible. That's the situation. It's a religious, it's something that comes from the heart, because many people, they prefer not to believe in the Bible because they think it's not convenient for them to believe in the Bible, which is totally wrong. They know the Bible. They should read the Bible. Some people, for example, if you based in if you take the example of the Middle Age, to not believe in the Bible is wrong, because in the Middle Age they didn't study the Bible at all. That's why and the revolution that was made, the Industrial Revolution, was not because of the people; it was because of the people believing the Bible. That's why the Protestants make it to happen. That's why in America was flourishing this bunch of new discoverers, inventors, and caring for the people, because they were working for the people to help them. That's not because the Spirit impressed in the Bible. Okay,
Yeah.
then you should know that, and then that's why the most important thing is not is something at the end you find that is the work of the devil, trying to block the mind of the people, not to approach, not to get closer to the real evidences, to the real philosophy that is in between the Bible.
Right.
Okay, because it will be the best thing for them, but you need to change their mind. That's why the the approach that I'm making to reach their hearts is to go through science, evidences, and trying to teach them about the way God is loving them and willing to help them, and is a God of freedom, and is a God of understanding. Then they will realize that they were so misled and confused about the real character of our God and His role and His love. Then, when they understand that, they could be more open to accept the Bible and read the Bible, and they will find a different truth
Mm.
about what they were being taught in the past.
Mm.
Many people is throwing rubbish to the real messages that are in the Bible. When you see a picture, when you see a movie, for example, in most of the movies they presented in the wrong way, the way Jesus talked, the way, for example, when you see John the Baptist, you
Mm.
see a very disordered guy shouting to the king. No, it was not like that. He was
Mm.
very, very honest person, full of love, talking humble to the people, but they present it very well. Then they think, oh no, this is a fanatic guy. No, the Bible is so absurd. No, it's something totally opposite to what I think it should be. And but the opposite way, they can see a very crooked person talking with love. Then then they see opposite situation, because
Mm.
it's a old deceitful scenery to deceive your mind. Then you
Mm.
need to go for the truth, but you need to do your own efforts to get to that truth. Okay,
Right.
that's
Okay.
that situation.
Thank you, Jorge. My question to you, Ross, here at the end is that based on what we have, just to summarize now, conclude, what would your advice and your challenge? Would you challenge a skeptic to look at the science or to look at the Bible or both?
Well, that's interesting because both evolutionists and creationists look at the same evidence.
Mm.
You know, we find a fossil in the ground. An evolutionist will say this happened millions of years ago. A creationist will say this was buried 4,000 years ago in Noah's flood. It's the same evidence for both
Mm.
groups, but the way they interpret it is different.
Mm.
So what I'd recommend for someone who's searching for the truth is look at those areas that are not ambiguous, that can't be read two ways. And sometimes that takes a bit of digging, you got to dig a bit deeper. And that's why I particularly like the work of Ron Wyatt, because his evidence of
Mm.
amazing occasions when God himself intervened in human history. God sent brimstone upon these wicked cities. God sent the flood. God came down on Mount Sinai and burnt the top of the mountain. These are amazing stories in the Bible, which people think, wow, that must be a myth. It's so radical. But you can say the evidence is there. Come with me and I'll show you the burnt mountaintop. I'll show you the
Mm.
sulfur balls and ashen formations. I can show you where the Red Sea crossing took place. And if we're blessed, we can actually find a chariot remains somewhere,
Mm.
So that's why I like the work of Ron Wyatt,
Mm.
because it's clear evidence of God's intervention in human history.
So it's important what you're also, I'm hearing you're saying. It's very important, it's essential, it's crucial to be open-minded. Yes, be critical. It's all right to be
Yes.
skeptical. Sometimes, many times, we should be skeptical, but it's crucial to be open-minded, because I believe
Yes.
that calling Christian biased and only seeing biblical creationism within the evidence and not looking, and this is what I've heard from my personal experience with people within scientific community, working in the microbiology field, and which I find really exciting, and I find also very intriguing, that some people still can't see, the designer behind such an interesting field. And I've heard that, well, it's because you're looking with the wrong glasses. But I'm
Yes.
kind of answering, why are we not being open-minded? Why don't you take my glasses on, and try to look from a biblical perspective? So both of you, can we conclude that if I'm going, this is something which I recently found on a Facebook page, also having conversation about creationism, evolution, science, something similar with what we have today. And are we in agreement about this? um,
Yes.
what would you
Absolutely.
say, Jorge? Is this is
Well,
what we realize when we go from a scientific perspective to people and we get their answer, we get their bias, we get their rejection within seconds, we realize that basically this is what's actually the reality. You know, almost nothing about either science or Christianity.
Well, it happened in the past. Even the scientists have that experience when you go against tradition. For example, Pasteur, no, he was saying that the microbes were the reason of some sicknesses. Then they was now how can we cannot see the microbes because they didn't develop the technology yet. Then Galileo was saying that the Earth was moving around the sun, and he was forced to deny that because the sun is the Earth was the center of the universe, but this was the popular thinking. Then even today there are people that believe the Bible is flat, no? And it's impressive that even today we have that kind of people. But in science, when you need to maybe to find the right science, and they will be together. But when the science is full of tradition and traditional thinking, you cannot disprove them because they don't want to allow you to disprove that. The same thing is happening today, for example, with coronavirus. Coronavirus is very simple to cure. There are simple remedies to cure coronavirus, but there's no open way for them to officialize that discoveries. For example, you can check in the website. You can see, for example, the work of Andreas Kalker, is a top scientist that is in Switzerland. Is living there because nobody accepts his research and not even trying to check on what he has discovered because it's an open way. But because of the situation, universal situation, now they're opening. They've been forced to open their mind and to accept this discovery. And now maybe it's changing. Just some countries are using this discovery of MMS and different other things. Then it's changing the mind, but it's so difficult to get to reach that because they're not allowed, they're not even to research. Right. They not spend money for you to research that or to prove that. I remember even people from the church. I remember, for example, my experience with David Down. David Down is one of the, I don't know if he's still alive, but he was one of the top archaeologists used by one of the churches in Australia. And he was the top archaeologist. And he went to my church preaching there, I was very excited. And I asked me to help him in some presentation he was going to do in the Opera House. I said, okay, what do you need? Okay, I need the projector and some things. Okay, I did all the help he needed. Okay, and he wanted to pay me. I said, no, of course not. I said, but give me just two things. One, subscribe me to your letter for a year, free, and also give me just 5 minutes of your time. Say, okay, yeah, I will give you that 5 minutes. Say, what do you want, George? Tell me. What do you think about wrong wire discoveries? Say, no, this is all rubbish. No, it's not true. It's just illusions. It's nothing. It's right. Okay. I say, okay, what do you think about Sodom and Gomorrah? Oh, yes, it looks like it's a city, but it's nothing. It's just illusions. What about the sulfur balls? Yeah, there's sulfur mining in the area, but nothing's there. But what about those? Have you checked the sulfur balls? Have you touched it? No, says, okay. What about the consistency, the shape, and all? I am an engineer, I said myself, and I find out that sulfur is not sulfur in pure sulfur, not sulfur. You cannot find pure sulfur in any other form but crystals. I said, and I explained everything to him, and he was scared. Was looking to me with the open mouth now and scared. I said, why? I was scared myself when I saw his face. I said, okay, we'll stop talking. Then sorry. Then he said to me, well, I said, well, I need to go. I said, why so scared? Because he was already publishing he did a special publication against Ronald Wyatt without knowing, without having the real evidences. And all the evidences he presented were easily answered. But he didn't he was invited many times to go to Jonathan Gray meetings. He didn't go. Okay. Then I said, well, what you can do against them? It's nothing you can do.
Right. Well,
Okay.
I'd like you to, before we finish today, Ross, I'd like you to go through your website, which I have here on the screen. And if you could tell our viewers a little bit about these videos and what you have on the screen here. Oops. Yeah.
Okay, I should first say my apologies to the website. It needs a lot of work on it, and that's one of those jobs that I'll get around to one day. But yes, there's a number of videos on there. There's videos of some of the diving we've done in the Red Sea to confirm if there's any evidence left behind of the Egyptian army. There's videos there about lectures on the garden tomb, looking at the biblical evidence for which is the real tomb of Jesus. There should be videos there about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
And there's some embedded clips in that which shows us where we tested at a laboratory the brimstone and also the ash.
I'm trying to scroll a little bit here. Just go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Another one could be a lecture about Noah's Ark, although that one may be a little bit because we've been very blessed in the last year. God has opened some amazing doors, but we could spend a whole evening on that, where it's looking like we could be excavating the Noah's Ark site very soon. So that's some of the things that you'll find on that website. But if anyone has any questions, there is a contact page on that website, so anyone's very welcome to ask any questions if anything's not clear.
Yeah, here you have it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Excellent material.
Yeah, I guess the one you mentioned. Yeah. So the website is
these are
discoverynews.net.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, excellent material. You know, I'm building my own
a lot of them
website, which is archigroup.com. And also I getting free people to help. Maybe you can give me a hand also with my website, because I think you're presenting this very well.
Okay, so a lot of very useful information, I believe people can find on your website here. I guess these are very valuable information. Really, never mind about the design of the website. The information is readable. I've seen the videos, or some of the videos are in a good quality. The main point is that people can understand and can see the evidence which is available on this website. Ross, would you be able to kind of tell our viewers now at the end, what is actually your next project, which is going to be, God's will, one of our next subjects? What is actually you were working on? Of course, if you want to go public with that.
Yes. Last year, well, I'll rewind. First time I visited the Noah's Ark site was in the year 2000. That's 20 years ago now. There's a lot of history to that. Of course, it was first revealed in, we think, the 1940s. An earthquake revealed a shape on a mountainside in Turkey. And about 10 years later, an aerial photograph by, I think it was a U-2 aircraft, spotted this shape, a boat shape, on the side of the mountain. And an expedition went there in 1960, and they had a look at it for about a day. They scratched on the surface, dug a few holes, and then they even blew a hole in the side. But they didn't find what they were expecting to find. They were hoping, I guess, to find nice preserved wooden boat in the ground. But they didn't find that. They found a lot of dirt, and later what they realized was probably petrified wood, but looked like rocks to them. And so it was forgotten for many years until Ron Wyatt in 1977, I think it was, visited the site. He refound where it was and visited the site. And ever since then, people have wanted to excavate it. The government has built a visitors center there in the 1980s. It's been radar scanned. But you know, even back in the 80s, people said this needs to be excavated. But you know, God has just shut the doors all the way along until last year. I was invited to Ankara, and this is not through any of my doing. This is God opening the doors through a friend of mine. I was invited to Ankara to meet with some people who, what they do is it's a Turkish organization, a non-government organization, but it works with the Ministry of Tourism and Culture in Turkey, and they develop sites in Turkey to make them UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Their goal is to bring tourists to Turkey. That's their goal. And the president of this organization has had in his mind for a while he would like to develop Noah's Ark. And he was looking for people to work with. And my name came up amongst that through a mutual friend. And so we got invited to Ankara, this is May of last year, April, May, to meet with this organization. And we now have a contract, and we're working with the largest university in Turkey and working through the Ministry of Tourism and Culture to begin researching, ultimately to excavate Noah's Ark. Now, we would have started that this year, except that a little virus came along called COVID-19 and shut everything down, unfortunately. So we're hoping, and unfortunately, even today, right as we speak, Turkey is getting about 1,000 new cases of COVID-19 a day around the country. So that's held up our permits and things, the paperwork, but we're hoping, by God's grace, and this is the thing, God has this in control, I believe, when the time is right, we can begin the research again. We've got all the legal framework in place. All we need now is the green light from the government to say it's okay to go ahead, and then we're going to begin researching. So I'm excited because it wasn't through any of my doing. This was God just opened the doors. So I appreciate if you can keep that in your prayers, that we can confirm one way or the other. This is the thing, it's a controversial site. Some say no, it's not Noah's Ark. Others believe it is. I believe it is, but we want to do it objectively, honestly, scientifically, and show, I believe, we'll show there's Noah's Ark is down there, but we're going to do it very carefully through a university.
Well, I believe a lot of people are very excited and waiting, including myself, to see the results. Hopefully, you're going to get a permit and access to the site very soon. So I'd like to thank you very much for being part of this webcast, this program. I know it's getting very late over there down under. Ross, I hope you'll get home safe. And I hope to see you again very soon, where we're going to continue our conversation, especially based on your video, Jorge, about creation. You have done a tremendous, wonderful video, which is available on our channel on YouTube and our website about creation, as well as on your channel, Jorge, on YouTube. If you could just repeat your channel on YouTube.
It's well, like my name, Flefel, Jorge Flefel.
Jorge Flefel. Okay, which is basically here. Yeah. Okay.
You look by my name, you will find the website or the site in the YouTube. I'm gonna start putting more videos, and also I have I'm building one new website which is called archigroup.com. And it's going to be with publishing information in Spanish and in English for both kind of viewers. And I'm very excited with this opportunity, and it's been very well accepted by different people of different status, and it's good. And also, the main thing is just, as I told you before, is to convert the the wise learner, and it's
Mm.
not easy task. It's the most
Right.
difficult thing, but we're getting there,
So a lot of
which is good.
scientific information on your websites. It's obvious that you are combining science with the Bible. This is the worldview which you are presenting, because it's not just because it's your bias, because it's available, because this is what real science is pointing to, in spite of
Yes.
a so-called majority that goes against a combination of science and Bible. So thank you very much again, both of you. See you next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
for the
you
opportunity.
very much. Take care.